Hi there, I'm Bjorn Englen, and you are watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. You know, a lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created ForBassPlayersOnly.com for people mostly over 50 who want to play bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. For BassPlayersOnly.com, that's what we're all about. I've got a special guest this week, Bjorn Englen. He's been with us a couple times before. Bjorn is originally from Sweden, and he became a fan of rock and roll at the age of 5 after discovering the band Kiss. He must have had really cool parents. And he found himself immediately drawn to the bass, which is very cool, and became pretty well established in the Swedish music scene, playing all kinds of clubs and theaters and festivals. In 1993, he moved to LA to attend the Bass Institute of Technology, part of the Musicians Institute in Hollywood, where he studied with none other than Tim Bogert, Putter Smith, Steve Bailey, and Alexis Sklarevsky. Bjorn has played with Quiet Riot, Yngwie Malmsteen, Soul Sign, Tony MacAlpine, and a whole bunch of other artists. It's great to have you back on my show. Bjorn, how are you?
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm doing great, actually. We're getting some nice spring weather in California. I'm happy, and life goes on, and doing some fun recording sessions, some fun writing, and all that good stuff. So, I'm looking forward to the future with more fun stuff here.
Well, great. I'd love to hear all about it, as would my audience, I'm sure. The last interview we did was actually in 2017. We were at the EBS booth at the NAMM show in California. And before that, we did another interview in 2013, also at the NAMM show. And your first interview on ForBassPlayersOnly.com was way back in 2010. So I've been doing this for a while. So give us a little more detail on some of the things that you mentioned. What are you up to these days?
Well, mostly I've been working with my band Soul Sign, and we have an album that's finished. We're just kind of looking for a good label and trying to nail down something good, to a good platform to put our album out on, and so forth. So that's pretty much what we're trying to do before we're booking shows and hooking up with booking agencies and stuff like that. We're talking to some booking agencies, but it's always tough when we don't have an album out with this lineup. So we have to make sure that happens. And it's been a long time coming. We're all session musicians. Everybody's super busy. Now we're kind of spread out. Two of us are in LA. One person is in the Palm Desert, which is not too far, and our lead singer is in Las Vegas. So it's a bit of a challenge sometimes, especially for rehearsals and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. At the risk of getting into a touchy area, you mentioned a label. What can you say about the, I hate to use the word importance or relevance of labels today compared to where they were, a generation or two ago?
Oh, kind of night and day in a way, because I think back in the day, I kind of like the idea of labels looking back, because they kind of worked as a sort of a filtration process. Although where I grew up, it was a little bit unfair, because I grew up, I actually had a little fanzine that I published when I was a kid or a teenager, and I would interview all kinds of bands, and I would get fantastic so-called demo tapes from really, really good bands that I feel deserve a better chance. And because of the labels, sort of limited a little bit, like who they signed and how many bands they signed. That was a little bit of an issue. So if you flip it around now, you don't really need a label. You can, or there's a lot more labels, but at the same time, you can release stuff yourself, and that's good. And it's sometimes not so good, because you sort of need a label, in my opinion, for they'll help with marketing and publicity and distribution. Although it's easier to distribute something in 2 seconds worldwide digitally. you still need help with sort of getting the word out and so forth. But I mean, there's really no one way anymore. There's many different avenues you can take, and I think right now, as we speak, is a time where it's sort of like I kind of feel there's a breaking point here where a lot of I see even more established bands are like just putting stuff out under their own label. So it's a really good question, and I think it's a really good time for any artist or any band or any musician to start exploring new ways, and whatever those ways are going to be, I don't know. It's going to be a big challenge, I think, coming up here. So
You've still got just a touch of a Swedish accent. I love it. I love listening to you talk. No, you make some good points there about the label. I'm not really in that space too deeply, so I wanted to just see what your thoughts were.
Yeah.
Last couple times, I think you were talking about Tony MacAlpine. You still doing anything with him?
I haven't. Last time I worked with him was, I'm going to say, early 2017, around the same time we last spoke, and we did last interview we did. We're still great friends and everything. And same thing kind of happened. He kind of had to revamp and redo his kind of thing, what he's doing, playing, instrumental music, the kinds of musicians that he can afford and how he can travel, all that stuff. And then shortly thereafter, the whole pandemic happened, and that kind of put everybody in a different ball game. But we remain great friends, and I talk to him quite often. So.
It's interesting because I've interviewed Bunny Brunel a few times, and I know he's done a lot with Tony MacAlpine. And you and Bunny Brunel strike me as two very different kinds of bass players, which is interesting.
We are very different, I think I play some of that stuff in private. I wouldn't go out and do a jazz gig like Bunny, because there's guys like him that can do it, 10 times better. So we're very different in that sense. But it's really cool to see that. And Bunny's a great guy too. And it's interesting. You get a guy like Tony, you see how versatile he is, as far as like he'll play a jazz gig one day, and then he'll play a gig with me the next day, and it's really cool.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot now, Bjorn. You mentioned, I think, in more than one of our interviews that you were, well, first of all, let me preface it by saying I've interviewed over 800 bass players. And wow. I say, so what's coming up in the future? And I can't tell you how many of them have said, well, I've played with so many other people, and I've always been a sideman, and I've got so much of my own stuff, and I'd really like to make my own recording, and I'd like to put my stuff out there. And you sounded like you really wanted to do that, and I just wanted to touch base and say, ask you, how's that coming?
Great question, and I kind of knew that was coming, but and I appreciate it, because I need that push. And I have a couple tracks ready, well, one or two that I could, I'm ready to release. So I'm thinking of doing track by track. I, was going to sit down and do a whole album, and it just kind of got put on the back burner because of other things. I didn't prioritize it because I felt like my band should be prioritized in that thing like that. So it's been a long time coming, but it will come one day.
Okay. Well, then we'll do another follow-up interview, and I want to talk about that. Past tense. My album came out, and it's doing well. Okay, I want to hear you say that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And you know what? To be fair, I had to take a look in the mirror, because I'm in that same position. I've got a lot of stuff, and you know what? I've actually started compiling a list and thinking about who I want to play, who I want to have play on it, and which tunes and which albums. So I'm looking ahead to that too. So it's funny. Another thing everybody says to me after they say, well, yeah, I'd like to put out an album of my own stuff. The next thing they always say is, but it's not going to be one of those bass records. I hate bass records, which I always find kind of amusing that people say
yeah.
that.
And and it's, I get it, and I understand that. At the same time, I mean, I'd like to play little compositions that anybody can listen to, even if you're not a bass player, obviously. So I understand that. I think that you can do a combination, hit two, two birds with one stone, so to speak, and kind of attract the bass players with whoever with the technique, and kind of draw other people in at the same time, and I just many wonderful bass players. Bunny Burnell's one of them. Michael Mannering. I mean, the list goes on and on. Marcus Miller is one of my favorites. Of where you can listen to, and it's beautiful compositions. So there's I think you can do both at the same time, really. And I think that's any bass player that's listening to this, like just do it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Michael Manring. I saw him years and years ago at Bass Player Live, and he's playing and he keeps tuning and I'm saying, when is he going to be tuned up already? And then it dawned on me, oh, that's the music. That's the because he's very creative with that stuff. But I probably shouldn't tell you that, mention that here in this forum, because it's probably going to not do very much for my credibility. But I did say it was many, many years ago. So I've interviewed Michael a few times too. He's a great guy, and I really respect what he does as a bass player, as an overall musician.
Absolutely. No, I listened to him even before I came to the United States, and then when I was at MI, the Bass Institute, he did a clinic or a performance there, and just really entertaining, and I appreciated having that opportunity, and he seems like a really nice guy, but he's very entertaining with the tuning and with all his playing and all that stuff. I think he's got one of those hip shot detuners on every string.
Wow.
Or at least one of his bass, or some of his basses have that, but it's really it's a trip.
I seem to recall reading that I looked over your other interviews this morning. You use hip shot stuff as well?
Oh yeah, since 1991 they've been on all my 4-string basses, or even now the 5-string basses now.
But just on one string though, right?
Yes. Yes. So far, never say never, but yeah. No, that's a good point, because on a 5-string, you would think that I put it on. First time they asked me, like, okay, well, you want it on the B string? I'm thinking on the B string. I normally have them on the E string, but then I'm thinking, like, well, why would I need a D tuner if I have a B string? But then at the same time, if I'm used to playing the 4-string stuff and I'm playing that on a 5-string, so you never know. Maybe I'll put it on a B and the E string eventually. We'll see.
How low do you need to go, or how low do you want to go? You want to go down to an A? Is that low enough? Is that not low enough?
I think it's low enough. I think it's probably the lowest I can remember. I might have done a couple of metal recordings where I'm tuned a half step and flipped down, so I'm basically A flat. But when I played with Tony, because I was like before, I don't think I really need a D tuner on the 5-string. Sure enough, he had a couple of tracks where we actually tuned down the B string to A, so it came in quite handy. And you know how it is, playing a gig, there's not enough time to tune in between, so that thing really comes in handy. And it's just a great invention, and I'm grateful for it.
It's funny. I'm often reminded of, who was it? Pete Griffin I interviewed one time during the Generation X tour. So it was Yngwie Malmsteen, who you know very well, and Steve Vai, and Tosin Abasi, Nuno Betancourt, and Zach Wilde. So Pete had, I think, 4 basses, and 2 of them were 4 strings, 2 of them were 5 strings, 1 or 2 of them had alternate tunings, and then he had all this gear because this one needs this sound, this one needs that sound. I said, my God, you really got to have your head on straight for that.
Playing with all those guys in one night. I remember one year I was in Tony's band, Uli's band, and Yngwie's band at the same time. Tony MacAlpine, Uli John Roth, and Yngwie Malmsteen, and booking shows and having to remember all the material. And they would be like, Yngwie would tell me, well, go through these 44 songs before we start rehearsals, stuff like that. And thank God Tony was always like, well, we're going to play exactly these 16 tunes, not less, not more. So that's kind of a great thing, to a great approach, but it was a lot of stuff to keep track of, and a lot of stuff to learn, and
a lot of room for
all in one night. Good God, with all that gear and stuff, I really,
crazy.
Yeah.
Speaking of gear, tell me a little more about yours. I mentioned EBS. Let's start there.
Hmm. Oh, I've been this year. It's been 20 years since I joined them, and been dedicated in Dorsey, and they've been very dedicated and very good to me, and it's been a great relationship. They were already pretty well established back then in 2003, but not nearly as well as or as big as they are now, and they've grown slowly but surely in there. They really make just wonderful amps and pedals, and couldn't be more happy. It's the problem is it's like you you drive it. If you have a fabulous car that you love, and then you have to drive a rental car that's just a mediocre car. That's how I feel when I have to plug into, if I do a flyout gig and I have to plug into anything else. It's it's a downer. But I've learned ways around it. Sometimes I have they have this little head called a Radmar, different versions of it, 502 and 752 or 750. I've been flying with that, and that's really been a saver. And also the pedals and the great preamp they have now called the Microbass 3, which is upgraded from the 1, 2, and now the third generation is quite different and really fabulous, and kind of like almost all I would need if I'm in a pinch. So it kind of saves me, but there's kind of a drastic difference sometimes between equipment, and I've been very lucky to have their support, and on any longer tour I do, they provide the gear, and it's just kind of a nice thing to know that you have reliable, great sounding gear every night and stuff. So it's been a great journey, and just the relationship too, growing with the company and getting to know them, and building the relationship for that many years. It's been quite fantastic.
Yeah, Ralph is a great guy. Ralph Burbo.
He's awesome. Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yeah, Burbo. Yeah, very good. He's been with the company a long time now, but he's just wonderful, and they're all great. Bo, the owner, and Mats, the engineer, is just brilliantly skilled. I couldn't be more grateful to everything they've done. So,
when you talk to those guys, what language do you speak?
Swedish.
Because your English is great, and so is Ralph's.
Yeah, very much so, and they all speak great English. And in fact, Mats, the head engineer, even is fluent in Spanish. So that's and I've been working on my Spanish for a while, and I'm not even nearly there, but I know a few words and stuff. So
you've lived in Southern California for what, 30 years, right?
Yeah, I have no excuses, but I didn't learn Spanish till about maybe 6 years ago, something like that.
Wow. Yeah, I was in Miami for 6 years. So, and I was traveling a lot. I was very, very deeply involved in the Latin music scene, and we traveled around Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia.
Oh, how fun!
And I couldn't stand it. Tell them I want coffee and some eggs, and I wanted to learn for myself. So I got a teacher, a maestra, and I was writing my verbs every night. I really, really, I studied 4 years of French in high school, and then I moved to Miami. It didn't do me.
I feel the same way. I feel when I went to junior high school and high school, I studied German for 6 years, and I did quite well, but very rarely do I get to use it. And now I feel like if I could have taken at least 2 of those years and swapped them and studied Spanish, I would have been very, very grateful. And for me, it was kind of like traveling around South America and Mexico and having local techs in every place. And even Puerto Rico, many times, none of them spoke even one word of English. And it became very difficult, and things were breaking down in the middle of the show, or sound checks, and you can't communicate with them. And the drummers are throwing drumsticks at them, and I told them, stop, they don't know what you're saying. Like, I'm like, so that's when I realized that, I got to, I have to step it up and start learning Spanish. And there's this really cool app on you can get on your phone called Duolingo that I've been using, and still got a long way to go, and been skipping way too much. But it's little by little, you can at least, if you know some words, you can communicate with people. And it's quite cool. It's very helpful for a touring musician, I would say.
Muy bien.
Yeah, muy bien.
Yeah.
Muy necesito.
The gear, you were playing Ibanez last time. Are you still with them?
I am. I've been with them now since 2016, and it's just been couldn't be more happier. It's great people, really, really good quality instruments. Yeah, the quality control is outstanding. When I get an instrument, it's just flawlessly. It's been flawlessly checked and adjusted, and they have a custom shop up here in LA, only like 20 minutes from my house, and it's quite convenient, and they've been very helpful, and couldn't be any happier. In fact, I just got yesterday a custom bass that we've been working on for almost a year now, I think, and finally got it yesterday. So
You just leaned back. Are you wearing an Ibanez shirt?
yeah,
Okay. Just a little bit.
representing here.
There you go.
Yeah.
Which models do you use? Which ones do you play?
Talman is the main bass that I've been playing, the 4-string basses, and they're really cool. They're kind of like I can compare it, kind of an old school traditional rock bass, kind of like a P bass, a little bit of different design, which is it makes it quite interesting. So they normally have 20 frets, and the bass I just had received yesterday has 22 frets. So I can show it to you if you want. But
if you can have 22, if you can have 22, why don't you have 24? For those 20 MacAlpine goods.
You're right. 24 is good. I don't feel like I ever needed 24, but I also felt like 20 frets or 21 was like one not enough. 22. My Ibanez that I had a couple of Ibanezes back in the late 80s, and one of the basses was my main bass from 1991 through 2003 or 2004 even, I think. And that had 22 frets, and I just felt like that was just enough. If I had to go and do certain things up there, it covered what I had to do, and by having them extend, so I didn't feel the need for them to extend from 20 to 22. But I said, "Can you please make 22 frets?" And they said, "Yeah, we can pull it off." So,
wow,
so quite fantastic, and they did a little, special cutaway so I can reach the high frets and 6 bolts instead of 4. So
it's an interesting pickup configuration. What's going on there?
Yeah, and I had it a long time ago. Growing up listening to Billy Sheehan and stuff like that, I put this little neck pickup on, and you get that old school low end that you don't. It's hard to get, and a lot of it has to do with the pickup placement. But it's just a specially designed pickup from the old Gibson pickup that DiMarzio did a revamped version of for Billy, and then so this is his new design of DiMarzio pickups, and that's a jazz. What's it called? Yeah. Special, something like that. I wanted a pickup that had it like more low end, so it could match when you start blending the pickups. That's always been my issue of like getting enough low end out of the bridge pickup. So, and also I made him swap the position of these two, having the issue many times of not getting enough low end out of the D and the G string. I figured that would do it, and the brief time I plugged it in yesterday was I'm just blown away. I've never been more happy with an instrument.
That's great. And as far as the 20 frets, 22 frets, I think you're better off as a bass player going down to an A or an A flat on the bass string than you are going up to 20 or 22. The old joke: upper register, cash register. One extreme to the other.
Yeah, or as they say in Nashville, there's no money above the 5th fret, something like that, right?
Well, they're right.
Very much so. There's a lot to that, Yeah, covering the low end is so important. It's goes a long way. It really does. Kind of the music I played with, like guitar shredders or power trios. Of course, you got to go up high sometimes, but it's.
There's definitely a place for it. I don't, but that's not the true traditional role of functioning as a bass player. Well, that's a nice segue. I want to ask you something that we touched on in one of the previous interviews, but I want to get a little more specific. I want to ask about your advice for somebody who wants to play bass, somebody who wants to learn bass. At my site, at For Bass Players Only, most of the people, it's a bass instruction site is the main thing that we do. And there are people coming every day from almost every state in the US and I don't know, 50, 60 countries around the world coming to learn how to play bass. Most of those people are men in their 50s, 60s, 70s. They're not career bound. They're not trying to be Billy Sheehan or, anybody like that. They just want to get together with their buddies and play some classic rock riffs or some blues shuffles or maybe a little walking bass. And a lot of times when you get to be in your 50s, 60s, 70s, things like arthritis and tendonitis come in. And, my emphasis, one of the things I emphasize is that you don't have to be Billy Sheehan or Stu Ham or one of these guys that is kind of a contortionist or an acrobat on the bass. It's amazing how great you can make the music feel just by playing a simple bass line that feels good, makes the music feel good without putting all that undue stress and wear and tear on the old muscles and bones. So in all of that context, given who we're talking about, there are some women too, but mostly men. What advice do you have for somebody like that who wants to learn to play bass?
I would say find and listen to songs. Maybe work with a teacher if you can't figure it out. But find a song that's as simple as possible, something that you like that is like a favorite band of yours or a favorite song. It has to be fun. And I found that if you start throwing songs, or if I start throwing songs at my students that they don't necessarily like it that much, or it's not really going to work. So that's the number one thing. And kind of play some simple scales, kind of get your hands warmed up and stuff. But I even say, like, you can start warming up to play C major down here, but it's quite a big stretch for Stanley Clarke or Billy Sheehan to start warming up here, in my opinion. I don't do it on purpose because, I don't want to cause stress on my wrist and stuff. So if you go up here to like the 8th fret and start, and you warm up.
You give them a pass to go up above the 5th fret for the purposes of this discussion.
Yeah, to shot myself in the foot there, but yeah.
No, I agree with you totally.
Yeah. So take it easy on your hands, and practicing scales is important. Learn the notes on the neck, but keep it simple. And you nailed it. Like just play a nice groove. There's nothing stronger than the place for the bass to when you play just a really strong groove. Like if you look back at the old funk and disco and even the Motown stuff, where just simple grooves, it's so much fun to play, and it goes a long way, and also drives the song quite a bit. Like it's sometimes, like, even if I wasn't a bass player, I hear certain bass lines, I'm like, oh my god, it just draws me in.
And just to build on something else you said, if it's a song that you really like, even if the bass line on the record is busy or complicated, it doesn't mean that you have to play that to play the song. You can play the same groove and capture the essence of the song by doing it very simply. Sometimes you only need a couple notes per bar to make it feel good and to get that groove going. So
I couldn't agree more. I think you're 100%, and you're simplifying it, and you still have the same tune, and it still feels the same. So absolutely, And again, it has to be fun. Otherwise, it's like, and I tell that to professionals, working professionals, as much as I do to beginner players, hobby players. Like, if you're not having fun, it's pointless, really.
You touched on some things that are coming up, but is there anything else that you didn't mention? If I were to ask you about the future, what else do you see lying ahead? Either something in the works or something you're thinking about, or something like, I've always wanted to, or someday I'll.
Yeah. It's one thing that I might, and I thought about for a long time, get more into the producer aspect of things and maybe produce some bands or even mix records for people. Something that I've started thinking about that, I have a good ear for, and, that's quite a good possibility that I'll get more into that, but not maybe in the immediate future, but definitely, yeah. And putting out at least one solo track would be something that definitely needs to be
No
tapped.
pressure from me. Hey,
Right. Yeah, right.
I've got one more question for you. What would you be if you weren't a bass player? Something outside of music.
The outside of music, maybe chef. I don't know. I've really enjoyed cooking, and I've never was that way or felt that way. If you asked me 10 years ago, I cooked out of necessity. Now it's something I really enjoy. So that's a possibility. It'd be fun to own a little joint, a little bar with a kitchen, something like that would be, kind of a fun thing to do. If you asked me when I was much younger, I would have said maybe firefighter, but career of that, I'm not so sure. That's something I'd love to do it for a couple of weeks just to see how they work, and it'll be fascinating. But yeah, so those, and it's interesting when people ask me that. Is possibly working with an instrument company would be fun too. It would be quite, just many aspects of something like that would be quite fun and challenging. Well, that's still music, so
that's okay. Okay, well,
outside of not playing music, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, maybe when we do get around to doing another follow-up interview, we'll bring some people over. We'll come to your house and you'll cook for us all, and then we'll give you our impressions. How's that?
Hey, perfect. That sounds like a good idea for a new show, then, huh?
That's right. Yeah, cooking with Bjorn.
There you go.
All right.
Bjorn to cook.
There you go. Well, thanks so much, and good luck, continued success with everything. And I'm just glad to see that you're still so active and vibrant, and you're energetic, and you've got a lot of great things ahead that we're all looking forward to seeing and hearing from you. So keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. Will do.
Thank you, Bjorn. You're watching ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. A lot of people think they're too old or it's too late for them to learn how to play an instrument. So I created For Bass Players Only for people mostly over 50 who want to play bass, because I believe you're never too old and it's never too late to experience the joy and the pleasure of making music. For Bass Players Only, that's what we're all about. I will see you all next week, same time, same place. In the meantime, let's play bass.